Hey everybody, it's Alexander Dahl with Manifest Brutality once again. So keeping on the current trend, I've got yet another interview ready to go. We're going to keep trying to do them 3 a week here as we go. And then we'll finish out the wave and then start looking at the next one. So without further ado, here you go. All right, bye. All right, so I'm currently on the phone with Charlie. He's another musician that reached out to me about the current interview series going on. So I'm going to go ahead and give him a chance to introduce himself.
How's it going? I'm Charlie Odle. I was a Bay Area musician for 20 years and recently moved out to Minnesota. Just kind of getting started over here. So it's been kind of a slow start with COVID and everything, but just trying my best to meet new musicians and get something started out here.
Sure, definitely. So typically, I always like to start at the beginning. I'm gonna kind of jump a little bit ahead just because I'm curious. What was the motivation to move from San Francisco to Minnesota?
It was a kind of multiple part thing. So a big chunk of it was just the cost of living out there and the cost of buying a house. We were considering buying a house, and what we were looking at was like 2 bedroom with no yard for 2 million,
Mm,
and we were just not interested in spending that much on potentially nothing.
sure.
And at the time there was a lot of fires too. I'm originally from Paradise, California.
Okay.
So my hometown burnt down
Hmm.
quite some time ago, and it was getting really sketchy because I'm an essential worker. I actually work in the veterinary field,
Okay.
and so I work outside a lot, and just with the smoke and with everything that was going on with COVID and everything being shut down all the time, it just got to be a little much down there.
Sure.
So we decided to move over in October, and it was not the greatest time to choose to move because it was right before the winter season over here. But
Right.
it was a good move because it's definitely been a different pace out here and just a little easier to live.
Sure, definitely. And, luckily this past winter we did have somewhat of a mild winter. Otherwise, yeah,
Yep, yep.
moving to
Which
Minnesota
is
in the
kind of
winter
scary.
is not the greatest idea.
Yeah, which is scary for me to hear because I'm like, man, this is bad, and everybody's like, no,
Yeah.
this is fine. It's
Oh yeah,
it's above
that
-10, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
yeah, that was nothing. All right. So anyway, we'll get back to what we're actually here for. How did you first identify music, and like what about it really kind of spoke to you and made you realize that you wanted it in your life?
So I'm actually part of a musical family. My dad was a longtime drummer in the Bay Area. He played with bands like War and Great Ken and all of them.
Hmm.
And so he played in the local scene. And growing up with him as my dad, I would follow him to practices, at 4 or 5 years old. And then around 6 or 7, he was like, you need to choose an instrument. What are you going to learn? What do
Hmm.
you feel like learning? And I said, I want to play guitar, but in my mind, I'm thinking, electric guitar with like distortion and like,
Hmm.
I'm thinking rock. And he goes out and he gets me this nylon string acoustic.
Hmm.
And um, to me, I was always just like, man, that's so lame. But he would come in my room and he would play songs on the guitar, even though he's a drummer.
Hmm.
And after a while, I was like, that's cool. What is that? Teach me that. And he started teaching me. And then high school came around and middle school came around. There was kids that were also getting into music.
Hmm.
And so I joined a band pretty young. I joined a band at, I think I was like 12 or 13 years old.
Hmm.
We played like talent shows, and then we kind of entered the punk scene in the Bay Area at a really young age and played some pretty cool venues and stuff with some bigger bands like Uzi Suicide and stuff
Hmm.
in the area, which was a really good experience. Even though I'm not really into punk music, it was definitely interesting being a part of that scene for that time, in the early 2000s.
Sure, definitely. And so, having that kind of exposure to it at such a young age, what was your kind of philosophy about getting a band together and how to perform, and what kind of stage presence you would have?
So my dad, he would always influence me in the way where he kind of had his own experience. So he was always like, play, have fun, but don't get too invested.
Hmm.
Don't put all your eggs in that basket because, one day you're going to have a side job. It'd be cool to make it, but you probably won't.
Hmm.
And so right away, I had that mindset of like, oh, this is going to be fun, but, maybe it's not going to be the only thing I do in my life.
Hmm.
Um, but with who I started jamming with, they were really they had really great work ethic. It was like meet, 3 to 4 times a week, play for an hour to 2 hours at a time. Everything needs to sound the same every time.
Mm-hmm.
And it became, it was a good mindset to really develop earlier on because we also, A, didn't have that much money,
Mm-hmm.
and B, we just kind of had what we had and we just had to deal with it. We'd go to recording sessions and we'd have one take because we'd be paying for it with, the change and all the money we scrounged up from like the last 3 to 4 years.
Sure.
So you had to be on point. You had to be able to do the recording in one take, or else it just wasn't going to work out.
Right. To keep it cost effective and yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because we couldn't afford to go over it and overdub, and so everything sounded very live.
Right. And so along those lines, as you kind of, grew up and kind of understood the process of recording, did you eventually kind of, get your own recording solution and do like independent recording? Or do you still
Yeah.
kind
Oh,
of,
definitely.
okay, sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually part of the Dallas community,
Okay.
so I like to play around with synthesizers and groove boxes and all that fun stuff. And through there, I kind of developed out of necessity a home recording
Mm-hmm.
place where I can record at home and getting set up in that sense. And it's crazy though because it's there's so much to recording,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody has a home studio nowadays.
Yeah.
So learning new things from people and networking is so important
Mm-hmm.
in that sense because there's always going to be somebody that can show you something.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's kind of one of those things where no matter how good you think you are, there's always somebody better.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Exactly. You can be the best guitarist in your mind, but there's some 12-year-old out there who's just killing it.
Yep. And thus is life. Um, so how did you kind of originally identify the type of content and the voice that you wanted to have, like when you created music?
So I think it's always been kind of deep inside me kind of a thing because to me, music and performance is all about expression.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a way for me to express what's inside myself. And, being abandoned as a child and going through a lot of the hard things that I've had to go through in my lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of created this need to be vocalized. And, through a lot of my childhood, I was kind of stuffing that voice down and just saying, you gotta do what you gotta do. But
Mm-hmm.
when art came around for me and, performances and songwriting, when all that came around for me, it was huge because it was a way for me to express myself and say what I needed to say in a way that wasn't extremely direct. And that was incredibly important to me because the first thing is to me, like I might not be the best guitarist, I might not be the best keyboardist, but my bread and butter is kind of songwriting.
Sure.
And yeah, it's been huge for me and just my peace of mind too. It's really a meditation form for me a lot of the time.
So between the time when you first started playing in bands when you were a younger teenager versus like where you are now, how many different iterations of a band do you think you've gone through?
Oh my gosh, a lot, a lot. Because are we allowed to swear?
Yeah, sure, fine, go for it.
Yeah. So the first punk band I was in was Shit for Brains,
Okay.
which was like a Bay Area punk band. And then from there, I moved up north and I was in a band called the Carnivorous Plants.
Okay.
And then I moved back down and started a solo project called Non Beings.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I started a band with my dad called Heavy Apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
All the while Non Beings is going on in the background. And then I played folk acoustic shows as a project called Mother Serpent.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then I kind of focused back on Non Beings and made it a 2-piece garage group. And then from there, now I'm kind of starting these numerous electronic projects, most of which are just going under the solo project's name of Non Being.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I'd say all up probably in between 15 and 20 projects, but most of them I'm not going to remember. And
Sure, definitely. So, of all of those projects that you have participated in, what are some standout memories for them? Whether it be, playing a show or in the studio writing or, going to see somebody perform.
So the two biggest and closest to my heart bands that I was in was I was in a Bay Area alternative band called Mon Pubis. And then I was also in Heavy Apparatus with my father in the Bay Area.
Hmm.
And Mon Pubis was the first band that I was in where we got into the age where we were able to play bars and
Hmm.
were really limited to just non-drinking venues. And we also recorded at Foothill College. We did a lot of things in the band. We never really gained a lot of popularity, but
Hmm.
we got out and we kind of, we did that first experience where, you play to a bar that has maybe two people in it.
Hmm.
And I learned a lot of networking. I learned a lot of how to book a show and how not to book a show and where not to book a show.
Hmm.
With that band, we would play any and every show that was offered to us. We would play, we played the Continental Club in Oakland, which is pretty much a dilapidated theater from the 60s.
Hmm.
And it had the other band members were essentially the crowd, and it was Halloween, and half of them were dressed up. And it was a weird experience, and it was
Hmm.
probably an experience that we shouldn't have played, but we just wanted to get out there and get the exposure,
Sure.
and we thought that was the way to do it. So that was one of the reasons why that band's so important to me. And then Heavy Apparatus is important to me because it's a band I created with my father,
Hmm.
and we had a lot of moments and played a lot of shows. And that band also went through kind of an evolving state because at first it was a three-piece with just my dad, my best friend, and me.
Hmm.
And then we kind of hired on another bassist, and then we hired on a female vocalist, and we played some pretty big good shows in that band. We played at the DNA Lounge a few times, which went over pretty well, and we were able to sell out some local bars, which was nice, and having a little bit of money coming in. But yeah, unfortunately, my dad got cancer and had to move to Arizona to be closer to treatment. So
Hmm.
that kind of dissipated before we can really get traction. But it's still going to be one of the most important projects to me, just because of having that time with my father
Hmm.
and also experiencing a certain time in my life.
Sure, absolutely. So what are some links where people can take a listen to the stuff you're working on and, check out what you're doing?
So I have SoundCloud. I have an account for my solo project where you can see Non-Being is the name of the project. And then also on YouTube, you can find Heavy Apparatus on, what is it called? Reverb Nation. You can find Heavy Apparatus, Mon Pubis, Schiffer Brains, and Non-Being. Um, so yeah, through any of those websites, you can find samples. There's not a whole lot of YouTube samples of Non-Being, but SoundCloud, there's some pretty good recordings on there.
Excellent. And so I always like to give the person that I'm interviewing the opportunity to put out their last word. So a message that you kind of feel resonates with you.
Yeah, so my message for other musicians and just people out there is just experience all there is that life can offer, and even if your band doesn't make it, have fun doing it, have fun creating music, have fun, producing the music that you want to produce. Don't do something just because you think other people will like it. That's not the way to go.